The steel door slammed shut behind Marcus Webb with a finality that echoed through the containment chamber. He stood motionless for a moment, listening to the magnetic locks engage with heavy metallic thuds. On the other side of that door, Commander Rains and his security team were already walking away, their footsteps fading into the depths of the orbital station. Marcus turned slowly to face the interior of the cell. 20 meters square, reinforced walls, a single observation window of darkened glass. And in the far corner, pressed against the junction of two walls, crouched the reason he had been locked inside. She was smaller than he expected. The reports had described a violent creature, responsible for the deaths of 3 Marines during her capture on the moon of Hadris Prime. They had called her a monster, a savage, something barely sentient. But looking at her now, Marcus saw a girl who might have been 19 or 20 in human years. Her skin held a faint lavender hue, and her eyes were too large, too bright, burning with an amber light that tracked his every movement. Ridged bone structures curved along her forearms and the sides of her neck. Her clothing was torn, stained with what might have been blood. She hissed at him, a sound that vibrated in her chest like a warning from a cornered animal. Marcus raised his hands slowly, palms forward. He took a single step toward the center of the room and then sat down on the cold floor, crossing his legs. The girl watched him with those burning eyes, her body coiled tight, ready to spring. He had volunteered for this. When Commander Rains announced they were preparing to execute the alien prisoner because she could not be controlled or communicated with, Marcus had stepped forward. He was the station's xenobiologist, though his formal title hardly mattered now. What mattered was that he believed intelligence existed in those amber eyes, and that killing her would be murder, not pest control. Rains had been skeptical. The security chief was a military man through and through, someone who saw threats and neutralized them. But Marcus had pressed his case. Give him 1 week locked in the cell with her. If he could establish communication, prove she was sentient and sapient, they would spare her life and attempt proper first contact protocols. If he failed, or if he died, Rains would have his evidence that she was too dangerous to keep alive. The commander had agreed with a grim smile. Marcus suspected the man was hoping the alien would solve the problem by killing him. Now, sitting on the floor of the containment cell, Marcus wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The girl had not moved from her corner, but her lips had peeled back to reveal teeth that were slightly too sharp, slightly too many. Her hands ended in fingers that seemed too long, too flexible. He cleared his throat softly. Her head tilted a fraction, tracking the sound. Marcus began to hum. It was an old song his mother used to sing, something gentle and wordless. He kept his eyes lowered, not meeting her gaze directly. In his research, he had learned that many species interpreted direct eye contact as a challenge or a threat. The humming filled the silence of the cell, echoing slightly off the hard surfaces. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Marcus continued to hum, changing to different melodies, keeping his posture relaxed and non-threatening. Eventually, he lay down on his side, curled slightly, making himself smaller. He closed his eyes, but remained aware of every sound in the room. When he opened his eyes again, the light had shifted. The station's artificial day cycle was moving toward evening mode. The girl had moved. She was no longer pressed into the corner, but had advanced halfway across the room. She sat in a similar position to his own, watching him with unblinking intensity. Marcus sat up slowly. She tensed but did not retreat. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ration bar, one of the few items he had been allowed to bring inside. He unwrapped it carefully, broke it in half, and placed one piece on the floor between them. Then he took a small bite of his own half, chewing slowly, making the action visible and deliberate. The girl stared at the offered food. Her nostrils flared, scenting it. Minutes stretched out. Then, with movements almost too fast to follow, she darted forward, snatched the food, and retreated to her new position. She sniffed the bar carefully before taking a tiny bite. Her face contorted, clearly finding the taste strange, but she ate it anyway. Marcus smiled slightly. It was a beginning. The next day followed a similar pattern. Marcus moved slowly, spoke softly, and made no sudden gestures. He ate when she could see him, slept in the open rather than trying to claim territory. The girl remained wary, but began to mirror some of his behaviors. When he sat, she would eventually sit. When he ate, she would accept food. On the third day, Marcus began introducing objects. He had requested basic items through the food slot: a ball, some fabric, simple tools. He would demonstrate each item's use, and then leave it in the neutral space between them. The girl watched with fierce intelligence. She understood cause and effect immediately. When Marcus rolled the ball and it bounced off the wall, she tracked its movement with precision. When he left the ball in the middle ground, she waited until he retreated before investigating it herself. By the fourth day, she was initiating interactions. She would place the ball in the center of the room and then retreat, watching him. When Marcus rolled it back, she made a sound that might have been pleasure or excitement. They continued this simple game for hours. The fifth day brought a breakthrough. Marcus had been drawing on the floor with a piece of chalk provided through the supply slot. Simple images: a circle for the station, a stick figure for himself, another figure with her distinctive ridges and proportions. He pointed to each drawing, and then to the corresponding real thing: station, Marcus. The girl crept closer, staring at the drawings. Then, with one elongated finger, she pointed at her own image. She made a sound, a complex series of tones and clicks. She repeated it, pointing again. Marcus tried to replicate the sound. His human vocal cords could not quite manage it, but he approximated as best he could. The girl's eyes widened. She made the sound again, slower, breaking it into components. He tried again, getting closer. She pointed at him. He understood. Marcus placed his hand on his chest and said clearly, "Marcus." She attempted the word. It came out strange, the R sound too harsh, the S whistling, but it was recognizable. Marcus. He nodded enthusiastically. Then he pointed at her, eyebrows raised in question. She placed a hand on her own chest, careful to mimic his gesture precisely. She made her sound again, then seemed to think. Her mouth worked around human phonemes, and finally she produced something he could work with. Lyra, Marcus repeated, and her face transformed. The constant wariness softened. Those burning amber eyes reflected something that looked remarkably like relief. From that moment, progress accelerated. Lyra was not savage. She was terrified and alone, trapped among creatures she could not communicate with, who had killed members of her scouting party. The Marines she had killed had been trying to drag her unconscious body onto a transport. She had woken mid-abduction and fought with the desperate strength of someone who believed they were about to die. Marcus learned her story in fragments, through gestures and drawings and the handful of words they managed to share. She was young by her people's standards, part of an exploration crew that had encountered human ships near the border zones. There had been a misunderstanding, weapons fire, chaos. She had crashed on the moon's surface and hidden in the ruins of an ancient settlement. When the Marines found her, she had been injured, starving, and convinced she was facing execution. On the sixth day, Lyra showed Marcus her people's written language. She traced elegant symbols in the chalk dust on the floor. He recognized structural patterns, grammatical logic. This was not the marking of an animal. This was sophisticated communication from a culture that had developed language, art, and technology. Marcus spent hours at the observation window during sleep cycles. speaking to the recording systems he knew were monitoring every moment. He presented his evidence to whoever was watching: the language, the tool use, the clear emotional intelligence. Lyra was a person, by any reasonable definition that mattered. On the 7th day, Marcus woke to find Lyra sitting closer than she had ever dared before. She was looking at him with an expression he had come to recognize as curiosity. When he sat up, she did not retreat. Instead, she reached out one long-fingered hand and gently touched the side of his face. Her movements careful and deliberate. He remained still, letting her investigate. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, touched his hair, examined his ear. She made a soft sound, almost like a laugh, at the strange shape of human features. Then she took his hand and placed it against her own face, giving permission. Marcus mirrored her earlier examination, noting the subtle differences. Her skin was warmer than human skin, smoother, with a faint pattern of scales too small to see, but present to the touch. The ridges along her neck were flexible, responsive to emotion, or perhaps respiration. They sat like that for a long time. Two beings from different worlds, learning the simple fact that they were both alive, both thinking, both capable of gentleness. When the door opened on the 8th day, Marcus was not expecting it. He and Lyra both turned toward the sound of disengaging locks. Commander Rains stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 Marines with Wepo.